Hello and welcome to another business strategy video. I'm Professor Kuban, and today we're going to be discussing the resource-based view as a way to do internal analysis of a firm's strategy. So today we take our analysis inside the firm. With the resource-based view, we'll be examining resources, capabilities, and how they relate to competitive advantage. Now first we need some context. Within the external environment, we have the industry environment, which we've discussed with Porter's 5 forces, and within the industry, there's strategic groups. Today, we're looking inside the firm, specifically at the resources and capabilities, core competencies, and how they relate to strategic competitive advantage. So why does internal analysis matter? Well, while external analysis does a good job of explaining the differing profitabilities between industries, it does not explain why some firms are more or less profitable within the same industry. For example, in what Porter would call an attractive industry, the pharmaceutical industry has an average profit of 12%. However, firms within that industry range in profitability between 7 and 19%. Meanwhile, in the less attractive steel industry that has an average profit of just 2%, firms within that industry range from losing money at a negative 3% up to 15% profitability. Thus, the best steel firm is more profitable than half of the pharmaceutical firms. In fact, when we examine the impact of firm and industry effects on firm profitability, we find that factors within the firm have twice the impact as those at the industry level. This is good news for management majors because it shows that managers matter, people matter. There is a difference in profitability based on things going on within the firm's performance, and not just picking the right industry and sitting back and doing nothing for the rest of your lives. This brings us to the resource-based view. The resource-based view assumes that each organization is a collection of unique resources and capabilities, and this uniqueness is the basis for differing firm performance. Therefore, sustainable competitive advantage and above-average profits are derived from developing superior capabilities and resources. So what do we mean when we say resources? Well, resources are simply the inputs that firms use to create goods and services. Now, they can be anything. They can be tangible, like a factory, or intangible, like brand image. Human, capital, financial resources, these are all resources in the resource-based view. Now, RBV makes a few assumptions. One is resource heterogeneity. That's differences between the resources. So, for example, people are not interchangeable widgets. They have differing knowledge, skills, and ability. And so there are going to be differences between the programmers that Apple has and the programmers that Google has, for instance. The other assumption that RBV makes is that there is imperfect resource mobility. So this is that some resources, such as corporate culture, are difficult to move from one firm to another. So what are capabilities? The definition is the combination of procedures and expertise that the firm relies on to engage in distinct activities in the process of producing goods and services from its resources. But an easy way to think about this is that management bundles together resources to form a capability. For instance, Chick-fil-A hires Smiles and trains its employees to say "our pleasure" rather than "you're welcome" as part of developing its customer service capability. Now we turn to core competencies. These are superior capabilities relative to the competition that lead to competitive advantage. Now, the criteria for determining such strategic capabilities are that the capability is valuable, obviously, and rare, at least somewhat unavailable to competitors, costly and or difficult to imitate. There are no substitutes available as an alternative to imitation, and the firm is organized to exploit the advantage. Now let's dive into each of these in a little more detail. First of all, valuable. We're looking for valuable capabilities. Now, as a resource can be just about anything, we need to rein that in a bit and exclude unique but not valuable ones. This is something that students sometimes struggle with, as it's almost too obvious. However, the flexibility of the resource-based views definition also sort of requires this valuable component as we consider capabilities that will ultimately lead to a competitive advantage. So for instance, a firm may employ an abundance of left-handed people, but that is unlikely to lead to competitive advantage in the industry. Now, when we consider rarity, we're talking about its availability to competitors. Now, it can be a localized rarity. For instance, McDonald's building a restaurant inside a Walmart. That is a rare location because there's only one such location within each Walmart. It can also be a more absolute rarity, such as a diamond mine, that there are only so many in the world. However, if it is commonly available to competitors, such as computers, which are a valuable resource but available to everyone, then it is not rare. Costly and or difficult to imitate. Now, the most commonly cited difficult to imitate example is corporate culture. Because of the multifaceted and complex nature of interpersonal interactions, corporate culture is very difficult to imitate. For instance, Southwest has a uniquely fun culture with flight attendants making jokes during pre-flight instructions. However, this is part of an overall culture that is pervasive throughout the firm. This is why Delta can't just tell its flight attendants, hey, make some jokes, and imitate what Southwest has done through a concerted effort to have this fun culture. You can think of substitutes as an alternative to imitation. So while Barnes & Noble's large store network gave it access to customers and purchasing power that was costly to imitate, Amazon.com found a substitute for that network of stores. So while substitutes and imitations are very similar, substitutes tend to be something more out of the box than a direct imitation. This is why they often take firms by surprise, because they are focused on more direct ways of imitation and can miss ways that firms can substitute something that has the same end value of competitive advantage without directly imitating it. Finally, organized exploit. While some competitive advantages, such as good reputation, can automatically translate into additional sales and profits for the firm, many require the firm to be organized to exploit their advantage. For instance, McDonald's exploits its recognizable brand by placing their restaurants in locations frequented by travelers, such as airports, interstate exits, where the potential customers are unfamiliar with the local restaurants and therefore likely to choose a brand that they know versus one that they don't. Now let's go through this handy flowchart and assess some capabilities with RBV. Is the capability valuable? No. Well, let's replace the management team. All right, I say this in jest, but seriously, if the management team is considering non-valuable capabilities as a potential source of competitive advantage that will lead to above-average profits in the industry, they probably should seek other work. Moving on, and assuming that we are only looking at valuable capabilities. Is it rare? If not, we'll only achieve competitive parity. This is because this capability is available to everyone in the industry, and it'll just become an industry norm. Is it costly to imitate? If not, this will only lead to a temporary competitive advantage. Soon it will become an industry best practice and imitated by all its competitors. So it'll be a short-lived advantage, but then will go away. If it is costly to imitate, is the firm organized to capture that value? If not, at best, this will serve as a temporary competitive advantage that is not fully taken advantage of by the firm. If it is, this will lead to a sustained competitive advantage that will allow the firm to achieve above average profits, and those profits can help it sustain its advantage by being placed back into the firm. Now, a crucial core competency to consider is that of human capital. A firm's human capital and the employee knowledge is often at least part of a firm's competitive advantage in many areas. So a firm must create an environment that both fosters this advantage now, developing and expanding that core competency, but also protects it from future losses. If you have a few key employees that if they leave, your competency goes away, then that is a threat to the firm's future profitability. It's also good to consider the entire value chain as you search for core competencies within your firm. Different firms are better at different things, and depending on your business model, certain parts of the value chain may be more valuable to your firm than another firm. So this is a good place to look for areas that your firm excels at. It's also a good place to find areas that your firm is not so good at. You can then outsource those deficiencies for a variety of reasons. Outsourcing allows you to improve your business's focus. You're no longer trying to get better at things you're bad at. You can focus on what you're best at. You can gain access to world-class capabilities through other firms, for instance, in accounting. It can accelerate moving into new areas, re-engineering a product, because all of your focus is on what you do best. It allows you to share risks with other firms, and it can free up resources for other purposes. Now, as we touched on briefly in talking about human capital, there is this ingoing and outgoing that happens in the firm. You're constantly bringing in new resources, tangible, intangible, human and otherwise, but you're also slowly losing things as well through leakage, forgetting, and so this picture of a bucket that you have to kind of keep refilling because the bucket is leaking is a good way to think about the inflows and outflows of your resource stocks. It's a continuous cycle to stay on top of your capabilities and make them superior. So in addition to this resource inflow and outflow, resources, capabilities, and core competencies can change over time. This can be not only within the firm, but relative to other firms. Your competition may catch up to you. The greater external environment or industry could change and shift what is important to the industry, to the customer. So because competitive advantages are not permanently sustainable, firms must exploit their current advantages while using their resources and capabilities to form new advantages that can lead to future competitive success. Now, these new advantages can be in the same area, for instance, Walmart's ever-improving inventory management system, or in a new one, like when Apple moved into music streaming. But the importance is that you must stay on top of your capabilities. You must continue to develop them and look for new capabilities that you can develop as the world changes, as the industry changes, to be able to stay on top of the industry, to keep that competitive advantage. Hey, if you enjoyed that video, be sure to hit the like button, subscribe for future videos, or sit down and write a poem about how wonderful the resource-based view is. Until next time.